And welcome back to the Metal Command podcast. Now let's talk about Nevermore. So I came out in the beginning of the year on New Year's Day and talked about, the surprise that Nevermore was making a comeback, and they're going to come back with a different singer and a different bass player. And Jeff Loomis had pretty much announced afterwards the basis of why they are coming back. Same thing with Van Williams. Those two guys are bringing the band back. Obviously, Warrell Dane is no longer with us, and Jim Sheppard, the original bass player in the band, is not coming back with the band as well. So after that whole thing was announced, of course, there was something that came out. Jim Sheppard's wife, of all people, I thought that was a little bit odd, put out a statement basically saying Jim thought it was disrespectful and thought it was disrespectful that the band was coming back. And there was really nothing, he didn't really elaborate on anything in regards to that, to which Jeff Loomis and Van Williams put up statements kind of detailing some things that had happened, not really giving explicit details, but basically saying that when the band broke up in 2011, there was a lot of tension between, Van and Jeff versus, Warrell and Jim Sheppard. I mean, that's kind of what it insinuated based on the statements that Van Williams and Jeff Loomis had made. So then Jim came out and elaborated that he was kind of disappointed that they didn't contact him about it, and said he wishes them the best. Not so sure he really truly means that, but nevertheless, let's talk about it really quick. So, in the statements from Jeff Loomis and Van Williams, they talk about tensions. They kind of went into a little bit of detail saying there was a lot of bad things that had happened. There was a lot of bad blood going on between, Warrell and Jim versus Jeff and Van. I mean, that's kind of how I read it. And to be honest with you, I remember when Nevermore broke up, I thought it was a little bit odd that it happened the way that it did. Now, obviously, we are never going to know what truly happens behind the scenes. I could tell you that there are bands that I know personally that I've witnessed situations, and when they put the press release out about why somebody isn't in that band anymore, typically you're getting kind of more of a cookie cutter statement. But folks, none of us, unless you're there, none of us know the real story or what really happened. So obviously Van Williams is retired. Basically his statement, he was talking about how he, lives in Alaska now, and his wife is a wildlife photographer, which, by the way, I think is really cool. And he's content with that and wishes those guys the best. Now, his disrespectful comment, what did he mean by that? Was he upset they didn't ask him? Was he upset they didn't contact him? And it could be a little bit of all of that. Maybe he's upset that, the band is coming back and would rather let it rest. And I get that. I understand if he has those kinds of reservations and he's not happy about this, especially if you've had, some conflict in the past with the guys that are bringing the band back. I can understand why he would feel the way that he does. But it's very clear, saying he wishes them well, that he's kind of like, okay, I can't stop it. I'm just going to wish him well and leave it at that. Now, I've encountered Jim Sheppard in the past. I remember meeting him when the Dreaming Neon Black tour was happening and they came to Cleveland. Super nice guy. Warrell was super nice. Jeff was kind of quiet, but he was super nice. And I met Van, but I didn't really hang out with him. And I did an interview with Warrell, Jim, and Jeff in the second floor of the club that they were actually playing in. It was Peabody's Down Under in the Flats in Cleveland. If you're from Cleveland, you'll understand exactly what I am talking about. So, here's the thing with the Nevermore thing. What's interesting? When they announced that Nevermore was going to make a comeback, usually when you don't have the original singer, especially a guy like Warrell Dane, who was loved by a lot of metal fans, usually you get a lot of pushback. You see a lot of people, a majority of people are like, no, don't bring it back, or it's going to suck because Worrell's not there, or the singer's not there, or whatever the case may be. You didn't see as much of that. In fact, I didn't see a lot of it, actually. I mean, there were comments made like that, but I was expecting a lot more of that. And at least on my page, like on social media where I post a lot of this stuff, I saw very little of that. Now you got to ask yourself, why would that be? Like, why would you not see as much pushback with Nevermore coming back without Worrell Dane, obviously? And I think a big reason for that is I had to go back and think about this. Jeff Loomis and his guitar playing was just as important to people, if not even in some cases more important, than Worrell Dane's vocals. Meaning that Jeff was as much of an attraction for people to listen to the band as Worrell's vocals were. And if you were a guitar player, Jeff Loomis was probably the biggest reason you listened to the band to begin with. Now, Worrell Dane had a very unique vocal delivery. He was a very different sounding vocalist, and obviously after the band had initially broken up, he went off and did another Sanctuary album and then passed away, sadly and unfortunately, before his next solo album could actually be completed. And I have nothing but love and respect for the guy. But at the same time, I have no problem with them coming back, because when I was thinking about it and I was listening to a lot of the Nevermore material and all the albums that they created, I realized that Jeff was a big part of why I liked that band to begin with. Now, it's interesting. Him and Van Williams mentioned a lot of tension going on, right before the band broke up. Tension had been building. There was some conflict. To me, one of the weaker albums they put out was the Obsidian Conspiracy. That was the last album they released. And it makes a lot of sense, because I remember listening to The Godless Endeavor thinking, man, this is one of the greatest albums I've ever heard. And then the Obsidian Conspiracy comes out, and, it was pretty solid, but it definitely was not as good as the previous, 3 albums they had done. It's just a little bit of a weaker record. It's still good. I'm not saying the album is bad, because it's definitely not, but by Nevermore standards, it wasn't as good as the 2 or 3 albums previous to that. I didn't think it was as good as Dead Heart and a Dead World, for example. So that's essentially where I'm at when in regards to Nevermore making a comeback and doing what they're going to do. They're going to go out with a new singer and a new bass player. Now, they do have auditions. Let me touch on this a little bit. One of the things I think is really cool about Nevermore holding auditions, they aren't just going out and getting some name singer and recycling some guy that's been in 20 other bands in the heavy metal scene. They're actually going out and looking for vocalists that will fit what they have going on. It could be a guy that's known, or it could be somebody that is completely unknown. But the bottom line is, they're not just going out and picking somebody. They're going to go out and listen to people's auditions and demos. And all the information is on Jeff Loomis's Facebook page. If you want to audition, send an audition video into the band. I like the fact they are doing that. And they are going to be taking their time listening to these folks. And whoever they like, they're probably going to take their time and get to know those people a little bit before they embark on a tour or even making a record. And I think that's a very smart thing to do, because something like that, you got to find somebody that you're going to vibe with on a personal level, not just the musical level, but the personal level as well. Because you want to avoid the tensions or whatever issues you had right before the band broke up. And I think that's extremely important. And I think it's very smart of those guys to do it that way. So, Nothing But Love. I am really excited for this next chapter of Nevermore. And the other thing is, people, one of the things that was thrown out there too is that it's a money grab. First of all, Nevermore was never making millions of dollars to begin with. And the other thing is, Jeff Loomis was such an integral part of that band's sound. It makes more sense to just go back out under that band name, since he was pretty much, aside from Warrell Dane, the biggest part of that band's sound as far as, his guitar playing is concerned and the songwriting is concerned. Just go back out and make it the next chapter of Nevermore. That would be the smart thing, especially nowadays where marketing is really difficult and name recognition is definitely needed when it comes to marketing a band. So it just makes sense. I'm happy that they are back. I am, reading the words that Jeff Loomis and Van Williams put up on Facebook just makes me even more excited for this band to make a comeback. Really, really excited for it. So that's where I stand on the Nevermore thing. I'm really excited for them to come back. And I'm glad Jeff Loomis is going to be back at his best, doing what he does best, writing songs for that band. It feels like it was yesterday when they broke up, but it's been well over a decade since they have put a record out. So I'm looking forward to them making their comeback. Hey everybody, Tony here from the Metal Command podcast. Again, I appreciate your support. Since 1998, I have hosted this show in one form or another, starting off in radio and now in the podcast format. Again, thanks for watching, and if you like what you see and hear on this show, by all means, please hit the subscribe button, hit the little bell to be notified anytime I do post a video, and if you see this program on any other form of social media, please give me a follow there. Again, I always appreciate your support.